Adrian, please come up. We're excited to hear what you have to tell us.
Just a little correction. I have 4 grandchildren, 3 grandsons, and 1 granddaughter. And just wanted to clarify that. And also, I'm really a lay leader, not ordained. So I just wanted to let you know that. But I do submit myself to the people in the churches, and whenever I speak, I always send them my sermon ahead of time, so if they don't like it, they can tell me ahead of time. But I'm glad to be here, and good to see old friends, older friends, new acquaintances, other people that I've seen, perhaps online in some meeting or something. And so I'm really thankful to be here. And this town, when I was at Six Nations in ministry working there, I had a Mohawk elder, fluent in his language, who said the word Toronto comes from the word Gitskaronto. And he says it means Bay of Floating Logs. So obviously referring to the Toronto Islands, and probably, the sandbar is a result of some storms or whatever. And whenever you have storms, you have like a lot of trees in the water. So, and that's been there for a long time. So that's where he said that word comes from, Gitskaronto. It's a K-I-T, and K is always a G sound, so he says it Gitskaronto. So I'd like to, mention that, first of all. I want to pass on what has been said to me. This part of the country is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt. This was an agreement between my Haudenosaunee people and the Anishinaabe people of the Great Lakes area. And actually the meaning behind this is that the land is the dish that feeds us all. So we had a good lunch, especially strawberries. That's the fruit of this land. And I really enjoy the fruit of this land. I particularly like strawberries in June, but I love peaches in August and early September. And I'm, there's just nothing like it. I've lived elsewhere in the world, and strawberries aren't as good because they ship it for a long time. And I don't know what they do to it, but it doesn't seem like a strawberry. And the same way with peaches. I get them and they're hard and they're dry and they don't peel at all. So I just love it. Every summer here back in my home territory, I get my peaches and then I just squeeze them, and when they're just right, it's so juicy. And a good pastor friend of mine says the juice just runs down your chin. And I like to be descriptive in my speaking here. So that's our agreement here. I work with a Christian Reformed church, and am really guided by this particular belt here, which is the two-row wampum belt. And when we encountered the Dutch in 1613, at the end of the Mohawk River, and where the Hudson River comes up from, at that time, New Amsterdam, which is New York today, but back then it was called New Amsterdam. And when the Dutch came up, we recognized their ship was a different technology altogether, a different language, So we knew that there were fundamentally differing ways of life that we were encountering. And we saw them cutting down trees and building a dock and, putting up storage houses and maybe some houses or whatever. And we came to them and said, "Hey, what are you doing? Who gave you this permission?" We wanted to know what they were up to. And so they told us they wanted to trade with us, that they wanted a business partner, they wanted a trading partner. They wanted to swing a deal. And our people heard what was going on, and then we do this thing called caucusing. And caucusing means you draw back into your own community, and we drew back into our clans, into our nations, and into our confederacy. And we discussed what was presented to us. So everybody gets a chance to weigh in on whatever the proposal is. So after, going back and forth, we said, this is what we believe. And it came actually out of dialogue, because the Dutch had things to say, and we went back and forth. And then we finally put this belt together, tubular beads made from quahog shells. And symbols that we had here was the white belt is the river of life. Literally, it would have been the Hudson River. One of the dark lines was the Dutch sailing ship. And it had come up that Hudson River. And we said to the Dutch, we have traveled this same river of life, literally the Hudson River, in our own technology, in our canoes. We have our own language, our own culture, our own leaders, our own technology inside of our canoe. And so this idea here is that we are together sharing the river of life. And that's what was conveyed in this. There's no domination of one over the other in this belt. There's no picture of somebody imposing their will on somebody else. There's a separation between the two. But it's not a separation of isolation. It's separated by 3 rows of beads between the 2 vessels. And the first row was the desire for friendship. We said to the Dutch, you may want a business partner, but we want friends. And basically we were saying to them, we want family. And it's an interesting note for me, Joseph Brant led our people during the American Revolution, and he was a Mohawk leader, and he supported the British, and we ended up in southern Ontario. But his mother, his dad actually died. His Mohawk dad had died, and then Joseph Brant's mother married a Dutchman. So Joseph Brant's stepfather was a Dutch person. And you don't usually marry enemies. You marry family. You marry friends. You marry those that you have good relationships with. And so we told them we want friends. Secondly, we said, in order to have deep friendship, you have to have respect. And I have described this middle row of beads like when I came home to my mother's house, I said I would melt into the couch. I didn't need to protect myself. I didn't need to guard my heart. I knew that I would be fed, I would be loved, I would be taken care of. I could completely be myself. And that's what peace is. Not, putting down your weapon. Peace is having such respect that you can completely be yourself and be unafraid. And that's what we wanted in that relationship. And then the third row of beads is we have this concept of a good mind. When people do good things, it's an indication that their mind is working in a good way. When bad things start happening, There's something going wrong in somebody's thinking. They're not thinking right. And so we said that if we had a good mind and we have this kind of relationship, we will be strong and have strong relationships. And so that's what this was all about. And so 1613, so 412 or 13 years ago, we still keep that. Oops. Yeah, maybe if you could, yeah. It's my longest belt, so sometimes I don't realize how far it's over. We noted that sometimes the Dutch and other Europeans, because we made the same agreement with the British, the Americans, and we remind Canada all the time too. We noted that sometimes people forgot about what we said in the first place. We have 412-year-old memory. And the reason we can have that kind of memory is that the belt that brought our nations together in the first place is over 880 years old, and we still tell the story of that belt. So we have a 880-year-old, at least, memory that we keep alive in our community. So 400 is just kind of, that's teenager stuff. So 1713, that's kid stuff, you know. So, and we didn't have a problem forgetting. Europeans tended to forget. So we created this called a silver covenant chain. And we said those three values between us is like a chain. We noted that you had iron chains, really strong. And then in the dialogue, we said, they'll be made out of silver, and they need to be polished up every now and again, because silver tarnishes, it becomes black, and you can't really see yourself. But when you polish it, it's like a mirror, and you can see yourself in it, in shiny silver. So this silver covenant chain, so there's two different peoples that are connected by this silver covenant chain that needs to be polished up every now and again. So I've said to people that it's my job with the Christian Reformed Church. You know, I know that not everybody's Dutch, and the people that are members have come from all over the place, but the beginning place was Dutch heritage. And I said, I'm here to polish the silver covenant chain, to remind everybody this is what we had in mind in the beginning, and we still believe that that's what should happen. So tonight, I'm going to be talking to you about Indigenous perspectives on reconciliation. And I can say to you, because of our experience with the Dutch, we were friends right in the beginning. For decades, we were friends. One evidence of that was that we adopted the Dutch New Year's celebration. New Year's Day, Dutch children run house to house, yelling, "New Year, New Year," and then the household hands out oliebollen to them. I grew up at Six Nations. I didn't know this until a couple of years ago. I grew up at Six Nations, and I was in a traditional family, not a Christian family, but a traditional family. And we as kids would go house to house on New Year's Day, January the 1st, before noon, yelling, "New Year, New Year," which is our announcing of the new year. And the people in the house would come out and give us Indian donuts. We think it's an improvement on oliebollen. We also have the argument between raisins or no raisins. We probably got that from you. But all I'm saying is that you don't, because our traditional New Year's isn't till late January, early February. So January 1st meant nothing to us, but it meant something to the Dutch. And we saw you doing that, and we adopted that. when you share rituals and traditions and share food, that's an indication of friendship. Now, I worked for many years in Manitoba, and the Native people out there, they don't like the word reconciliation. You know why? Because they said reconciliation means to make friends again. And they say, we never were friends to begin with. Because there was all kinds of things that happened in their relationship with Canada and the British. It was not good almost from the word go. And so I understand their feelings about it. And I never argue that they're wrong about it. That's their understanding of their experience. And I honor that because that's their experience. That's not my experience. As Haudenosaunee, we were friends. We did have a good relationship. Now, the Dutch forgot, the English forgot, the Americans forgot, Canada forgot, and the relationship deteriorated. And residential schools is an evidence of all of that. But I can say literally, we can become friends again. So speaking to the Dutch community, I said, yes, we can reconcile. We can become friends again. But it requires truth. You know, we need to have truth and mercy. You can't just have forgiveness and just never deal with the justice issue. The fact that Jesus died on the cross demonstrated the reality that God takes consequence very seriously. And Jesus suffered, not for his sake, but for our sake, and demonstrated that justice matters to God. And so, because my title is so long, Senior Leader for Indigenous Justice and Reconciliation, people don't remember it. And then they say, you know, Adrian's a leader of reconciliation. And I stop them right away and I say, no, Indigenous justice and reconciliation. Justice comes before reconciliation. And so I really commend the Christian Reformed Church for the long history of work that has been happening in Canada from the 1968 overture from Classis Quinty that said we need to begin having ministry to Indigenous people in Canada. And so I come to my job just the last 3 years jumping on a train that's long and it's been moving for a long period of time. So I just want to honor that and respect that. One little advertising before I talk further from our slides. On Thursday night at 5 o'clock at Redeemer University in Ancaster, the author of this book, Daniel Coleman, he wrote the book Grandfather of the Treaties, and he's referring to the two-row wampum. And also he has on there the silver covenant chain, which is the reminder of the two-row wampum. He's an ally, scholar. He worked together with my friend and his collaborator, Rick Hill, who knows the wampum belts and the wampum teachings and has done deep study in that area. And so Daniel Coleman, Rick Hill, and myself will be in conversation at 5 o'clock till 6 at Redeemer in person, or it is going to be streamed online as well. So if you don't, you can just go online and listen to our conversation, and you'll learn more about these two belts in particular in that conversation. So I want to mention that before we talk further tonight. September 30th, today is a National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And I wanted to say, first of all, that this day is not simply a federal initiative. This day comes from the Indigenous community saying to the federal government, we need to have a day where this is featured and so that people can learn about the residential school system. It didn't come from Canada. Canada had a long time to do this, but they never did it. They had a long time to do all kinds of things, and they never did it. They never did anything until the survivors of the residential schools sued Canada and the churches. Then Canada was forced by the courts to do something. So even the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is not Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It's the survivors' Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because they were the ones that said, we need to tell our stories to Canada so that this can never happen to any other child again forever. That was the purpose, and it was a part of this settlement. So I know Canada likes to take credit for it, but I know otherwise, and I always remind people it was funded by the survivors. So, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Whoops, wrong way. It also coincides with Orange Shirt Day. Orange Shirt Day is, it was another Indigenous grassroots commemoration to raise awareness of the individual survivors' experience, their families' experience, the community's experience, the intergenerational impact of Indian residential schools. And everybody has, or most of these shirts have, this day also promotes the concept of every child matters. And the orange shirt is symbol of what happened in the schools, of the stripping away of culture and the abuse and different things that happened to the children that were mentioned in our liturgy as we began tonight. So the reason for the Indian residential schools was assimilation. And the Prime Minister said, when he apologized for the Indian residential schools, he says the policy of assimilation is wrong and has no place in Canada. Because children as young as 3 years old were taken from their parents and sent to residential school. Can you imagine a 3-year-old and your children or your grandchildren being taken away, not just to school down the road, school hundreds of kilometers away where you can't travel there very easily. You can't afford to travel that far. And they were taken hundreds of kilometers away from their communities. These children were forbidden to speak their languages, and some of them, they didn't know any other language. They only knew Cree. And when they spoke Cree, they were disciplined. They had, the straps and rulers and soap in the mouth, all kinds of punishments for speaking their language. And because they were separated from their families, they lost touch with their own cultures and all the things that was normal in their community, they didn't know what it was. And many children were abused in different ways. And Phyllis Webstead was the lady that is behind the Orange Shirt Day. She's Northern Shuswap from the Canoe Creek First Nation. And she has mixed Shuswap and Irish-French heritage. And she lives in Williams Lake, BC. Actually, it's quite near where Marlene Walters, who is the chair of the Canadian Indigenous Ministries Committee that guides my work. Marlene Walters is Chilcotin as well. So this lady comes from nearby her community. Phyllis is the founder and the ambassador of the Orange Shirt Society, and she tours the country telling her story of the origin of Orange Shirt Day and raising awareness about the impacts of the residential school system. So this is a quote from her. I went to the mission school for one year in 1973, 1974. I just turned 6 years old. I lived with my grandmother on the Dog Creek Reserve. We never had much money, but somehow my granny managed to buy me a new outfit to go to the mission school. I remember going to Robinson's store, remember Robinson's? And picking out a shiny orange shirt. It had string laced up in front, and it was so bright and exciting. I just felt to be, just like I felt to be going to school. It was bright and exciting, and that's how she felt. When I got to the mission, they stripped me. They took away my clothes, including my orange shirt. I never wore it again. I didn't understand why. They wouldn't give it back to me. It was mine. The color orange has always reminded me of that and how my feelings didn't matter, how no one cared, and how I felt like I was worth nothing. All of us little children were crying, and no one cared. That's why every child matters. And she's not saying Phyllis matters. She's saying every child matters. And so, I don't know, there's been pushback from people, pursuing these calls to justice, and there's some people says it's woke, and they don't want to hear anything about that. And it's like, if anybody ever came up to me and says, how come you're wearing an orange shirt? What's that all about? The government pushing all of that stuff? I'd say, I'm wearing this because Phyllis Webstead asked me to wear it. I wanted to tell Phyllis Webstead's story, and that's why I'm wearing this shirt. If you have problems with that, go talk to Phyllis. October the 4th, coming up, is the National Day of Action for Murdered and Indigenous Women, Girls, and Gender Diverse People. So there's more recognition around this time of the year for various things that have happened to our people. And then on May 5th, Red Dress Day recognizes murdered and missing Indigenous women as well. So today we have this National Day for Truth and Reconciliation that has the federal government made it a statutory holiday, but that was a call from the survivors. And then Phyllis brought us the orange color. And this is her when she went to school, and then this is her more recently. So I can just imagine, I've seen many little Indigenous girls just like that. And I look back at some of my early pictures of my daughters, and they look just like that too. Now, when I think about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I think about the Apostle Paul, because the Apostle Paul was tasked to preach the gospel everywhere. And one day, like he was traveling, and they tried to go one place, and the scripture says the Holy Spirit wouldn't let them. They tried to go this place, the Holy Spirit wouldn't let them. They tried to go someplace else, and they just didn't have freedom to go there. So they were at this little seaside town, Troas, and this happened. During the night, Paul had a vision of a man of Macedonia standing and begging him, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." After Paul had seen the vision, we got ready to go at once to leave for Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. And they then got in a boat and crossed the Aegean Sea into Europe and came to Macedonia. But what I noted in the story too is that they never came to this man. The first person that they came to was Lydia, a seller of purple, a businesswoman. And she was the first one in Macedonia to come to Christ. And then a second person was a slave girl that was possessed with a spirit of Python. And she was delivered from her spirit because the spirit that was making her prophesy, because she was in slavery, human trafficking, and she was set free. So 2 women were set free before then Paul was arrested and thrown in jail, and the man in Macedonia really was the jailer, because they were singing in the prison, rock music, and they shook that whole place, and their chains fell off, and the doors swung open, and the jailer knew that if anybody escapes, it's his neck. So he was ready to fall on his own sword, and Paul says, "Don't do anything, don't do yourself any harm." So Paul and Barnabas got out and talked to him, and the jailer and his household came to Christ. So, I think that as there was a call from Macedonia, from somebody from Macedonia, the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action is a call to the church, just like the Macedonian call. And I'll tell you what, it's the graciousness of the survivors to call to the church and say, even though you did this to us, even though you destroyed our language, you disciplined us, you abused us, you hurt us, and you affected future generations, we're calling to you. And 12 of the calls, of the 94 calls to action, reference the church. That's the grace of God coming back to the church saying, even though you were doing the wounding, come and help us heal. So I don't understand when churches have, an objection to, responding to that call. I guess you probably would have told Paul, stay over here, don't go to Macedonia. But you're not that stubborn, are you? It's okay to laugh. We've done some training in Indigenous ministry called Indigenous Asset-Based Community Development, where you look at not the problems, but what assets do you have to provide future solutions, etc. And I can say that our people have already done that for you. The Royal Commission on Aboriginal People, released in 1996, in response to the Oka crisis, the land fight at Oka, Quebec, the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People, I think they spent $51 million traveling all across Canada asking Indigenous people what needs to be done. And they came up with 440 recommendations. So we said, there's 440 things you can do. The UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, passed by the UN in 2007, embraced by Canada more recently, has 46 articles. There's some more things to do. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Survivors Truth and Reconciliation Commission, 94 calls to action, 12 of them are geared directly to the church. It speaks to teachers, and I'll tell you, Canada's teachers have taken these calls seriously. And right across the country, from kindergarten to grade 12 and into universities, they are responding to the calls and teaching all of their students about these things. I think the church should be leading the way, not following way behind. And then the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report has 231 calls for justice. So our people have answered, here's what can be done. And they're all the idea of let's partner to do this. Now, reconciliation for a lot of people is good, especially the church. They're familiar with the word, so they're amenable to it. And when Trudeau was elected in 2015, He said a lot of good things. In fact, he wrote a mandate letter to Carolyn Bennett, the Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs. And Trudeau said to her, in particular, I expect you to work with your colleagues and through established legislative, regulatory, and cabinet processes to deliver on your top priorities, to support the work of reconciliation and continue the necessary process of truth-telling and healing, and work with provinces and territories and with First Nations, the Métis Nation, and Inuit to implement recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, starting with the implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. When I read that letter originally, when it came out, I was excited. I really thought, yes, finally somebody gets it, they're going to do something about it. And then, after a little while, I had time to think about it. And somebody asked me at a church that I was going to in Oakbank, Manitoba, and they said, what do you think about Trudeau and this effort by the Minister of Indian Affairs and Truth and Reconciliation, all of that? I looked up and I said, well, the same set of federal lawyers that advised Stephen Harper are the same set of federal lawyers that are going to advise Trudeau. I'm not going to hold my breath. And I was prophetic. Call me a prophet. Because, it's hard to read all of this, but this is kind of like a report on the calls to action. Maybe 13 have been accomplished. A bunch of them have been started. A good whack of them haven't even been started. And, there's some that's not reported on. I noted that in the various assessments, especially the secular Indigenous assessments, they have next to nothing about what the churches are doing. And to their credit, they didn't put it down as, failing or anything like that. But there's no report either. But I think that some people after a while saw that actually Trudeau is the son of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. And back in 1969, Pierre Elliott Trudeau and his Indian Affairs Minister, Jean Chrétien, tried to erase Indigenous identity and the treaties and basically steal all of our land, and we had no recourse after that. So when Trudeau II came along, there was hope that he wouldn't do that, but as we went along further and further, it seemed like, okay, he's doing the same thing. He's got good words, but it's not following through. So I came up with this kind of restating reconciliation, REC, as in a tragic mess. Con, as in a con game. Silly, that's self-explanatory. A, very Canadian accent. And then shun, Indigenous dismissal. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of people in the Indigenous community, because nothing has really changed. And in fact, we've gone backwards in some places. Like, there's 1 out of 2 prisoners in Canadian federal jails are women, Indigenous women. Something like 1 out of 3 are Indigenous men. The women are highly incarcerated. So people look at all of the reforms and everything, and they come up with this kind of feeling. So, and I'm not saying everybody's that way. That's an extreme, just forget the whole thing. I've got a friend who refuses to wear an orange shirt. Basically saying it's just a politics of, he's Mohawk, he says it's just a politics of recognition, and it means nothing. And I won't play into that false narrative. I understand where he's coming from, But I'm doing the job that I'm doing, and I'm here to share. Here is an assessment. 14 calls complete, 42 that have been started, 22 are stalled, 16 not started at all. So I just want to close with you by just sharing this long history that the CRC has pursued justice, doing it for decades, and I just say keep at it. Don't stop. So I mentioned 68 Classis Quinti, 72 the Committee for Christian Missionary Ministry among the Indian people of Canada. Now our committee, Canadian Indigenous Ministry Committee. And this is what is so important about how we work in Indigenous communities. They did it, to their credit, back in the 70s. They looked at all that was being done in Indigenous ministry, and even the United States, they looked at what the CRC was doing in Rehoboth, which was a residential school, and the Canadian, and they're all not Indigenous people, they were Dutch folk, said, we are not going to do that. We're not going to force Indigenous people to be made in our image. We are going to listen to the community and do what the community guides us to do. So the committee establishes this process of looking to the community. 1973, Indian and Métis Family Center, now the Indigenous Family Center in Winnipeg. 78, Indian Métis Christian Reformed Church, now the Indigenous Christian Fellowship in Regina. 1991, Edmonton Native Healing Center. And all of these things are just steps on the journey. And we also have we had last year the Canadian National Gathering that, in 2000, there was this gathering, first Canadian National Gathering that dealt with syncretism, Indigenous ceremony that was used in Christian churches, etc. This is our Marlene Walters that I told you about, our chair, Indigenous Family Center. See, they meet in circle. There's no pews and pulpits and all of those kinds of trappings. We've got a new leader in Regina. Bert Adama has retired, and Joe Alkerton is now leading that work. And then Harold Roche in the Edmonton Native Healing Center. They've taken the focus on healing. They have a medical clinic there. They have a dental chair that they want to have a University of Alberta native or an intern to do dental work for people. They have a smudging room. They have Zumba classes. Michelle Neviadomi does Zumba classes with the ladies. So focused in on healing. We've got a new work that's beginning in Calgary called Walk As We, doing the same kind of thing. It began with a drumming circle that was in the basement of the Lantern CRC Church, and they had an AA meeting that was meeting there, and they're continuing to develop that into a viable center. And they do all kinds of things at that center. And then our 650 people have been through the 8-month learning journey, Hearts Exchange. 650 people over the last 5 years have gathered in a group for 2 hours a month to reflect on the 2-3 hours of learning that they did personally during the week or during the month. And so we're going ahead with this. We have had 4 groups at Meadowlands, 40 people, and we're going to add another 20 this year to that. So having 60 out of a membership of 400, that's pretty good. And then we have ways to follow up Hearts Exchange with communities of practice. But this is the most important thing that really gets people motivated, is on-the-land learning. We went to a sugar bush in near New Hamburg, and Métis elder Dave Skeen told us all kinds of Indigenous stories of the Carolinian forest, about the process of maple syrup and sugar making, and et cetera. We had 15 people come together, 6 hours on the land in single degree weather, just having a great time, gathering sap and firewood and just being around the fire listening to stories. So we do that kind of work. So to me, it's like I'm thankful for the things that have been accomplished that are real steps to actually build relationship, to do something about the problem instead of just, being upset that the problem exists. So I don't know if we have some questions or answers or things that you may want to share. We have a microphone that can come to you. If you'd like to ask a question or you have a comment to share, you can do that too, about this day and what we're trying to do at developing relationships. And
I have the first question.
Sure.
Tell us about your current financial campaign, that you're raising money for the on the land learning.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. For today, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, our advancement people and I, et cetera, put together a campaign to raise $10,000 for on-the-land learning, because we have people go to an on-the-land learning event and talk about it a year later or 2 years later in the case of some. It's impactful because it's not theory, it's not a PowerPoint, it's not in a church, it's out on the land. And you're hearing the story of the people, and sometimes you're hearing about the land right under their feet. And it's really, really good. And the campaign has been so successful that before we come to this day, we already raised our $10,000. And so whatever anybody gives to this campaign will push us way over the top, which is great. I'd like to be a part of that. And then the mail strike is going to stop a bunch of donations too. So whenever that is over, we'll be able to add to it. But it's kind of like, I feel like in the Christian Reformed Church, I'm riding a wave. There's interest and energy and support, like you all and the people coming here. Last night we did a Kairos blanket exercise at Huron Christian School, and they didn't know how many people would come. They said maybe 20, 30 people, 50 people showed up. So, it's just like tonight, it's, a good group of people who are interested from this church and other CRC churches and from where else. And I think that it is an indication that God is working in people's hearts, pushing this ahead, because reconciliation matters. So.
And we'd like to give you an opportunity to participate in the on-the-land learning. So any money that you would like to give tonight will go directly to that program, okay? We're not going to pass a plate, but there's a plate in the foyer, and there's contribution envelopes if you want to record it for tax, or give your address for tax purposes, tax receipt purposes. So I would encourage you to give to this, even though they've reached the $10,000 goal. Obviously, there's a lot more work they could do with more money. Mm-hmm. So anything you'd like to give will go directly, 100% of it will go directly to that cause, okay? Any other questions?
Adrian, thank you for your talk this evening. Thank you for telling us that it's the survivors that have pushed these things. I think as a Canadian, maybe I've been a bit naive thinking the federal government should take some credit. Thank you for setting me straight.
Yeah. Everybody likes to say, that was my idea. Anybody else?
Is it possible for you to tell us a little bit about your healing system? You don't, like here, I go to doctor and he gave me a prescription and done, but you do it differently. Can you tell us a little bit how it works? Your own healing?
Healing
Yeah,
process.
maybe you could repeat it
He
because I
said,
have old ears.
Would it be possible to tell us about your healing processes? Indigenous healing processes.
Process.
Healing.
Healing
of
process?
Healing, yes.
Well,
Or ways of healing.
yeah. Our people are relational. So just like this is between peoples. This is between peoples. And this is between people. So we know that when relationships are wounded, it requires us to come back together, to do something together. And sometimes all we need to do is tell our story. And sometimes when we tell the story, the other person says, "Oh, I see. I'm sorry," or whatever. And many times, because of that, just understanding where people are coming from, it's like then people get, "Oh, yes, now I understand." And you can move together, because if we can't move together, then we're still broken to some degree. So that's what we like to do in terms of relationships. So bringing people onto the land, we don't like to have a strong agenda. We just want to sit there sometimes and just drink coffee, chat with one another, and take time to listen to one another. So, because that's where kind of you build relationships and they become stronger. That's our healing process. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, over here.
I appreciate what's said. It's, we always want to blame the government for inaction, etc. But I think we need to look at ourselves and blame ourselves for the inaction.
Yeah. One thing that I did was teach for 7 years at the Canadian Mennonite University. And I would teach them like the broad history of Canada, but I would bring in the calls to action. And at the Canadian Mennonite University, everybody is studying in different areas. Some are science, some are agriculture, some are in teaching, some are in social work, and then there are people that are in theology. So I would always ask them, there's 94 calls, and some of the calls were to the government, federal government and provincial government. So if a Christian becomes a politician, they need to think about how are they going to respond to those calls. There were calls to lawyers. So if people were studying for the legal profession, there's calls there. If people wanted to be teachers, there's calls to the teachers. In fact, they said, if you are an archivist at a museum or a library, here's some calls for you here. Or if you're in the funeral industry, here's some calls about, unmarked burials or things like that. And then here are 12 calls to the church. Most of them deal with the relational healing that I just talked to you about. That's what they're looking for the churches to help them with. So I would always say to them, I can't, find the call for you. Look through them, read through them, think about them, pray about them, and what one comes to your mind? Oh, I could do that. I'm in social work, I could do that. I'm in teaching, I could do that. So I think that because I gave so many, 440 recommendations, 46 articles, 94 calls to action, 231 calls to justice, I've given you so many things that you could think about. Now, you can get overwhelmed and give up and not do anything about it, or you could seriously say, what could I do about this? I'm involved in life in this part of my world. I'm a scientist, I'm a teacher, I'm a social worker. I can do something. Just don't do nothing. Do something. Even just read a book. Read more about it. Maybe that's all you need to do to start with it. read a little bit more about what they're talking about. Because actually the final report is, thousands of pages long. It's all online. The Royal Commission is all online. The Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's report, it's all online. They're all online. If you've got internet access and a computer, you can start reading. And I'll tell you that all of the leaders of those groups were very qualified, like Justice Murray Sinclair. He was a senator. He was a judge. He was a lawyer. So he knew what he was talking about. And so they put that together, and the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's thing was put together by Indigenous lawyers. They're not just, whistling Dixie kind of in the middle of the night. It's solid stuff. Did you know that we're really smart? Besides me being a nice guy, I'm... Anything else, sir?
Thank you, Pastor Adrian, for your presentation. I'm just curious, could you just give us an example of one of the calls that have been stalled?
Yeah, the ones that have been listed as ones that have already been completed are like the call for this day. And then there has been like an affirmation of June 21st as well. People have made comments, they're mostly performative rather than like there's calls that really require a lot of work. The performative ones are the first to get done, and the government wants to just do that, or teaching people want to just do the minimum. But I think that the thing that is the most encouraging to me is that churches have done hearts exchange. Churches have, I've taught in seminaries, this information. That's a response. And in their publications, they've written articles about it. Kevin Duraff did a devotional on like September the 17th and talked about this. So to me, those are the kinds of things that are responding to the call to educate the churches about these matters. So, and what you did, inviting us to come to the Farsi congregation and talking with them. We shared our Indian donuts with you.
Yes. Thank you.
Any other questions?
My thanks also for your presentation this evening. It's been very informative. I'm also wondering if there are any more ideas that you have around the working on the land project that you were raising funds for. More examples, or if someone is interested in participating, how might they do that?
Yeah, we're going to do the maple sugar bush again, multiple times. We did it once, but we're going to do it multiple times. I have a friend in New Brunswick, so Fredericton Church and, maybe All Nations in Halifax, or others that may be interested. And we may invite other churches too, just to make a good size group of people. So we want to do that in New Brunswick. I'm going to visit in a couple of weeks' time my good friend who's Mi'kmaq on Prince Edward Island, and we're setting up our desire to get on the land, and he offered to do a sweat lodge with them. And I didn't think we were quite ready for that yet, but they can begin learning, because it's not only just being on the land and experiencing something, but getting ready to go there. Because I'll tell you what, and here's another secret I'll let you in on. Because Indigenous people have many feelings towards the word reconciliation, they have those same feelings towards you as Christian or church. Because right away, they don't... One Lakota woman, who is a traditional person, said, "We Lakota, we don't like Christians, we don't like churches, and we don't like preachers." But she went on to say, But Jesus, now there's a Lakota man. So actually, I face the pushback from my own community because of what the church has done. I didn't do it. I'm not behind it. But I face the pushback. People push back on me and, question my, my involvement with the church. And it's like, okay, I take your stripes. They should fall on you, but you're not close enough. And I'm there. I am there. And they're, being upset with me. Anybody else or anything else? And my email is there if you'd like to contact further and know more about any of these matters. That'd be great. And thank you for the opportunity to share here.
Thank you very much. We give you. Adrian, we truly appreciate you coming, and it's been really valuable for each one of us.
Okay, thank you very
We
much.
look forward to more ways of sharing.
Yeah, that's good. I will be back.
Okay. And hopefully we will see you on the land. Let's end this evening with a prayer, shall we? Our Lord, it has been good to be together. It has been good to have time to examine ourselves in front of truth. It has been good to hear some things that we needed to hear. May we go from this with a greater commitment to friendship, to family with people that maybe we don't even know yet, and to working towards relationships and reconciliation in this country that you've given us as our home and a home to so many people. So Lord, help us to take Adrian's challenge and to not do nothing, but to look up one of those many things that we are called to do and to do something on the path to reconciliation. All to your glory. Amen. Good night, everybody.